Hello, everyone. JCDC here. Got a little update video finally. Anyway, sit back and enjoy. This is going to be kind of a long one, I think. Got a lot to talk about. Mainly, we're going to kind of go over the solar system stuff and just give you an update on what's going on. So sit back and relax and enjoy. Hello, everyone. Thought I'd start off this video saying it's been a while. Obviously, we haven't put anything out in a while, but I wanted to show how our solar production is doing for the year 2021. A little bit late getting this out. Obviously, it's middle of April right now. So this is the Connects Gateway. So it's the Snyder software. I'm going to show the Home Assistant interface here in just a minute. But I wanted to start off here and show you how we kind of did. So you can see the blue here is the PV input, and we ramped up pretty high here in June and slacked off a little bit in July. That was because of cloudy days, monsoon season. August was a little better, and then we started dipping in September. I think the same thing. We had quite a bit of clouds and then tailed off again towards the end of the year. Now you can see also here in June was our highest load output. We had 1.3 megawatt hours of load, and that's because we ran air conditioning quite a bit. I've got an air conditioner here in the office where all the equipment's at, and we have one in the RV as well that we used quite a bit. And you can see also that there's some generator input there too. During this time, I wired in the generator temporarily. We have it actually permanently installed now, but temporarily I had it wired in, and we needed about 40.7 kilowatt hours. Nope, there's Goose. But as you can see here, I've got the PV output actually outpaced the load. So the reason why the generator was needed was there were some days where we actually ran the batteries down pretty low. And for us, low is 25%. I don't like to get them below that if I can. But we picked up the pace for PV for the rest of the month. And so I used the generator probably more than I needed to. There were some days I know throughout the year that I ran it longer than necessary just to make sure that the batteries were topped off, and in case there were more cloudy days or rain that happened. You can see here in July we had 96.3 kilowatt hours, and it was very cloudy in July and August last year, and even September, because we got a lot of rain last year. So I did need to rely on that, probably a little more than I should have, but anyway, that kind of tells the tale here. And one of the things I want to point out here is in December we had quite a bit as well. Let's see, 98.8. Oh, actually December was even more. And you'll notice the batteries input was the highest in December. So what happened is our propane regulator went out. So all of our heat in 2021 was produced by electricity. It got down pretty cold, especially in 2022, early 2022. We saw some teens here in St. David, Arizona. So yeah, it's very handy to be able to produce electricity. So we've got heater here in my office. We got one in the trailer, and we use those quite a bit in December. So just kind of give you an overall output of what 2021 looks like, being 100% off. Now what I want to take a look at here is, in this first window, is Home Assistant. Now I've talked about Home Assistant in the past. I've got some videos that show how I set this up. Right now it is 9:22 in the morning, and you can see we're 78% state of charge right now on the batteries. Shows our inverter load. I created another graph here to show net battery power, which basically takes what we're getting from the PV arrays minus the load, and it tells me how much is going to the battery. And then I also added this generator load switch here, so when I run the generator, I can tell how much I'm pulling off of it. Now, the color charts here, I may have mentioned in a previous video, but they're kind of arbitrary. I kind of did some calculations and decided how much should be, green or good. In the yellow, as soon as we get in the yellow, that's when we start pulling from the batteries. And I forgot how much it goes to. I think it goes up to about 2 kilowatts before it hits red. And we've been in the red before, especially when we've been drawing heat on those cloudy days. And but it's rare that I get into the red on the net battery power. So negative means we're pulling from, positive means going in. State of charge, I think the lowest we've ever gone down to state of charge is probably in the mid 20%. I try not to get those batteries below 25 if I can help it. And I've stress tested the inverter. We've got, like I said, we've got heat, air conditioning. I've got a crypto miner now that I use to actually heat the office now. So I've had that going, the AC going, hot water heaters turned on. And when the pump kicks on, I can get it over 5 kilowatts. So that thing just goes without missing a beat. We've got the state of the charge controllers here. They're both in bulk charge mode, and the inverter is inverting. Now these are buttons down here that allow me to switch from the current mode for the panels to bulk or float. So if something happens that the batteries get full, we can see right down here the voltage coming from the Schneider equipment is 54.07. So what'll happen sometimes, if I'm not running enough loads, I'll have the state of charge get to 100%, and I've derated these batteries. There's technically 1,088 amp hours, and I think I knocked them down to 980 as far as what the system thinks 100% charge is. So there's some leeway in there. But what happens is if we don't use enough of the energy before the batteries get topped off with enough amp hours, this voltage will kick up to say 54.5, 54.6. And what will happen is the delta between the cells will rise up, and it will cause the batteries to get out of balance because they're getting kind of close to being topped up. I try not to let them get above 3.5 something volts per cell. And if you're familiar with lithium iron phosphate cells, they top out at 3.65. So you shouldn't charge them above that. So I try to not let them go above that. So what I can do is I can flip this thing to float, and what it does is it stops charging for 30 to 60 seconds, and then the charge controllers will go into float mode. And then eventually, because of the draw that's coming off of the system, this delta here will come back down. Now you can see right now the BMS, now it's not a battery management system, it's a battery monitoring system that I'm using. It says we're 20 millivolts differential. Now you can see 3.37, 3.38 is what we're showing here, and these are actually adjusted values. The BMS that I'm using is called a CPM. It's from a company that's in Prague, Czechoslovakia, and it's not 100% accurate. I don't think I would recommend this to anybody. The reason why I bought it is I didn't want a inline BMS, meaning I didn't want to rely on the BMS to be a fault point within my system, so that if that died, I would basically lose the ability to use my system because we're 100% off grid. So what I did is originally, you can see back here behind the screen, I've got another BMS, and this is just a monitoring system. This is I think it's a JKS. Actually, let's see what it says here. Yeah, it's a JK BMS. And this is just monitoring the cells. I have this in addition to the CPM. And this is using Bluetooth. What I've got is a spare cell phone, and I'm basically screen capturing the cell phone onto my screen here so we can monitor it. And this guy is pretty cool because it goes down to the thousandths of a volt, so millivolts. So we can see here, this says we're 12 millivolts. Down here it says we're 20. So this is actually a computed value. What I did is, because like I said, the CPM is not giving me accurate readings. They're off by a little bit. And I've tested that with a multimeter as well as looking at this BMS here. So I have both of them connected to the cells. And so what I did is, in the program that I wrote that spits out all the data for this, I did a little calculation adjustment. And so these voltages here, and if we look down here at the bottom, I've got individual cell voltages for each of them. These are actually calculated values based on the differential to what that thing reports and what should be actual. So I'm doing a bit of a calculation for each cell. And then it does kind of this is a average, so it's actually rounding up. So as you can see here, this shows that it's 0.12. This may actually be the calculation 0.16 all the way up to 0.24. So this is actually rounding off that last decimal place is what it's doing. So that's why it says that, even though this shows there's only a 1/100th of a volt differential, even though that says 2. So anyway, enough of that. And then this calculation here is a little bit off of what the Schneider. So this is coming from the battery monitoring system from Schneider, which is connected to my shunt. This is actually a calculated value from that CPM module, and it's basically just the total of all these values here. So that's how I'm getting that. So I can actually look at the delta between these two, and they're pretty close. So it actually, with my calculation that I'm doing based on the differential that is actual to what it's reporting, I've got it actually pretty close. And it's actually fairly close to this guy. This guy's actually a little bit low, I've seen, from looking at my Klein meters that I hook up to the cells. But the data here is very useful to help me determine if this is accurate compared to this, so I get a good idea. This is only available to me when I'm here locally on my computer. I could use a phone. It's just a Bluetooth connection to this guy. But this interface in Home Assistant is available to me wherever I have network access. So on our phones, I can actually load up Home Assistant, and I can view all this stuff no matter where I'm at. I use an application called Zero Tier that allows me to basically get access to my local network, so I can view this data. I can control the charge controllers, the inverter, as well as a few other things that I've got automated here on the homestead. But anyway, that's kind of an overview of what's going on. Now we can go down, and I think I've showed this before. I've got all the battery statistics in here, the temperature. Everything from the battery temperature up is coming from Schneider. So I'm connected to the Connects gateway using a program that I wrote that actually communicates with Modbus over TCP/IP. And then the bottom ones here in the battery section are coming from that CPM module. And then everything else going down to where the cells are at is coming from Schneider. So we've got the inverter information. We've got these bottom ones here are showing the current coming in when I have the generator running. That's why it says AC2 and L1 and L2. That AC2 is hooked up to the generator. And then we've got some charge controller statistics going on here as well. Now these, what you may notice if you did some calculations, these together, the two arrays and the inverter load, do not add up to this net battery power. What I'm showing here is the watts coming in directly from solar. Now if you have run solar at all, you'll notice there is some losses that happen between watts coming in from panels that get converted or down cycled to the correct voltage for the batteries, because these are coming in, let's actually see here, 90 volts and 88 volts respectively for the primary and the secondary. And then what the charge controller does is it downgrades the voltage to 54.28 and 54.39, and then pumps that into the batteries. So there's a little bit of a loss going on there. That's why if you add these two up and subtract this, you don't get this. I wanted to be able to see what the panels are actually producing. That's why I did those that way. Let's see, let's get back down to some more statistics here. So they're not quite peaking out. You can see usually when I'm getting peak sun, like I said, right now it's about 933. I get about 3,000 to 3,300 watts from each of these guys. So since it's early in the morning, we're not peaking out on them. And then down here, like I said, these are coming from the CPM. And again, I just repeat that voltage. Now down here, I have a little graph. I've got a sensor in the room here that tells me what the current temperature is. And this is useful if I'm away. I actually used to, till the thing broke somehow. I had access to turn on the air conditioner remotely, but for some reason the Wi-Fi died on that air conditioner. So I'm going to see about replacing that or maybe trying to fix it. Just to kind of go over some other stuff, I do have what I call the DC dash for my initials, where I can control lighting. I've got a couple of heaters here. This is a hot water heater in the RV, and we have a laundry room hot water heater. These I use for dump loads. So when the array is still able to produce a lot of power and the batteries are full, what Home Assistant does is it uses this state of charge and the net battery power. And if it notices, say, the amp hours here, when this gets to be 980, which is what I've set the 100% capacity to, and it sees that we're generating positive net battery power, what it will do is it will kick this guy on. And then if the net power is still high enough, and the reason why that'll happen, if it's still too high, it's because the charge controllers are in absorption mode. And so what it'll do then as well is it'll kick on the laundry hot water heater. We have the hot water heater in the RV hooked up to Google Calendar. And what we have a schedule set up, and Home Assistant is integrated with that Google Calendar to say, okay, at this time of the morning, kick on the hot water heater, and then at the future time, which is we let it run for about an hour, we turn it off. So we don't actually have this running all the time. We probably could in the summertime, but we don't really need it. But that's how we get hot water for our showers early in the morning. This is on a schedule through Home Assistant. And I have what's called a Shelly switch that I use to control this through Home Assistant. It's called a Shelly 1 PM. And it will control up to 15 amp loads through Wi-Fi. And it's basically just an inline relay that you can toggle either through the Shelly app or through, there's an integration with Home Assistant. Now this guy is using a TP-Link outlet plug. This shows us, our current power. We're not really using it, but in the last 24 hours, I've consumed, a half a kilowatt hour from the RV hot water heater. This guy we haven't turned on. Again, here's that equipment room sensor. And then I have the phone one here. And this is basically the same data that I showed before, but it's formatted in such a way that it's easy to see on the phone. So it's a tall, thin view of all of that data. And then it's got a panel up here at the top that I can access the DC dash stuff, as well as control the lights. And then I've also got some Home Assistant monitoring. So my processor usage, disk usage, how much memory it's using, and all that good stuff. So, okay, so I just wanted to give you guys an update on the solar project along with the integration within Home Assistant that we're using. Now, I weaved in a couple of little clips in there to give you some teasers about where things are going. This is kind of pre where we're at right now. I actually recorded this footage earlier in the year. I think it was back in April or March that I recorded this. And now we're going to move into the next phase of how we're doing the upgrades for solar and batteries that I kind of hinted in there. So we're going to go over this all again. I also did some changes with Home Assistant, upgraded the plugin that I did as well for a few things. And we're going to talk solar panels, batteries. Let's see what else we've got. Like I said, some changes in Home Assistant. And we're going to be talking about house build here pretty soon. I need to weave in some of that. So stay tuned.